Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road. What does it mean to worship God 24/7 in all of your life? You know, God brings people into our lives who are mentors, and our guest today, Den Sutton, has been that for me. He was a generation above me. His nephew, Bob, and I were best friends in high school and basketball teammates. We made a storied run in the state tournament, and Den was there every step of the way. So it was just natural for me through the rest of my life to have a relationship with Den and go to him when I needed guidance. David wrote in the 23rd Psalm, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." A shepherd's rod would be thrown at the sheep to prevent them from going to danger. The staff would gently pull around their neck to bring them back to safety. Today, Den is going to share a very vulnerable time in his life when he was in combat and taking enemy fire in Vietnam, and how the shepherd's staff and the shepherd's rod protected him. Denny, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Dean.
I'm going to call you Den and Denny. And what does everybody call you in your professional life?
If they know me well, it's Denny. If they don't so much, it's Dennis.
Okay.
I prefer Denny.
Okay. Yeah, we're not going to do Dennis. What maybe a lot of people don't know is you were an outstanding basketball player. And I want to talk about your high school career. You played for the Waterloo Wildcats, is that right?
I did. That was fun times.
And would that been, did your career overlap at all with Terry Habig's?
Terry Habig was a class of 65, as was I. He was at Auburn High School.
And so did you play each other?
We did.
Were those bitter rivalries?
Bitter rivalries. I always kid him. We played each other twice during our high school careers. The first time was in a holiday tournament at Auburn. Auburn beat us. Next time was in the sectional. We beat Auburn, which you know for Waterloo was huge.
That's a big
Of course,
deal.
so I always tell Terry, we won the big one. We won in the state tournament. He always says, yeah, but we beat you by more points than you beat us. I said, nah. We're still great friends. He's one of the best people I've ever known.
That is awesome. How did you end up at Tulane to play basketball?
Terry and I became really good friends through sports, primarily from Little League on up, and we respected each other, liked each other. He was going to Tulane. I got recruited late to go to Tulane. I went down there as what would now be referred to as a preferred walk-on. So I made the freshman team. Back in those days, couldn't play varsity ball. I made the freshman team. Terry was on scholarship, so he was going to make the team. So I got to Tulane primarily for my high school basketball coach knew Ralph Peterson, who was Tulane's head coach, and they together said, "Why don't you go down and walk on?" So I didn't know much going on. I don't know. We didn't have a whole lot of guidance in those days, Mitch, but that turned out to be a good decision.
What'd you think of New Orleans?
New Orleans was a step back in history. Here, I'll give you an example, if I may. I'm a freshman at Tulane and big city, New Orleans, so let's go out and explore it a little bit. So I got on what was called a Frette jet. That's a bus that went from all the way, Frette Street went all the way from Tulane to downtown.
Mm.
When I walked into the bus, there were 4 black ladies sitting in the front of the bus. The moment I stepped on that bus, Mitch, the black ladies got up and went to the rear of the bus. Couldn't believe it. I went back to them. I said, "What are you doing? You don't have to do that for me." They wouldn't talk to me. They just knew that was what they were supposed to do. That was a shock, a big shock.
Mm.
So in that sense, it was really different going to school in the Deep South.
How long were you there?
A year and a half.
And did you transfer to IU?
I did.
There?
Yeah. I thought I was a good ball player, and I thought I was good. I think I was good, but there were players a lot better than me, I tell you.
You graduate and you decide you're going to enter law school?
I did. I had a degree in history and studied hard, so I had good grades, so I had some choices. Law school was late in the choices, actually, but I applied and got admitted to IU Bloomington and was ready to go to law school.
Now, your dad owned the grocery business then, right?
He
Mom
did.
and Dad were working at it every day, and you didn't think that was going to be your pathway?
I had a big brother, you know him, Jim. He said, "You better do something else." But he said it in a good way, and I didn't really want to be. I worked all from the time I was 8 till in college. I worked in a grocery store. Didn't really want to do that.
So what kind of notice do you get from the government on the first day of law school?
I got notice that I'd been drafted.
And what did that mean then? What was the expectation that was carried with it? Where were you going to go?
I figured I was going to end up in Vietnam, and that's what happened ultimately. Yeah.
So you get to Vietnam, and what's that like? What's your first couple of days like?
First impression is we flew into, Long Binh, Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, and the minute you step off the plane, this unbelievably hot air hits you in the face, air like you had never felt before. It was just unbelievably hot, instant sweat, and that was the first impression, just so hot.
Like a deep tropical kind of heat, but like no breeze to cool you down.
It's a good description.
High humidity.
Yeah.
What's your role then as a soldier in Vietnam?
Well, I trained as an infantry, in the infantry, and that was my what we called MOS, and I tell you, I got a couple breaks really. When I first arrived, they needed people to, they'd had a lot of enemy activity around the airport, and they needed extra security guards. So for the first 30 days of my tenure in Nam, I stayed on base and was a security guard. So that's 30 days I didn't have to hump the bush, and so that was a good thing. Ultimately, after the 30 days was up, then I got sent up to what's called the 4th Division in the Central Highlands.
And what happens there? Are you going into battle then?
Before Tet of '68, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, the Chinese, their battle plan was to overrun, and they did a lot of that at great cost to them, of course at great cost to soldiers who were there. By the time I got there in the mid-'70s, the strategy had changed from trying to overrun, because their losses were so huge, to hit and miss, so to speak. So when you're out in the bush, Charlie may make contact with you 2 times in a week, may not make contact for another 2 weeks. So it's not like you're in battle every day. It's just not like that. At least it wasn't when I was there.
And you were getting, you had daily rations. Would you carry a lot on your back?
Oh yeah, that's the rucksack is what we call them. And there was, when you started, there was as many as 80 pounds you humped in your rucksacks. It would be a box of M60 caliber machine gun bullets, 2 or 3 strands of M16 bullets, all your C rations and grenades and rounds for whoever carried the M79, which is a grenade launcher. So you had a lot of equipment that you had to carry. It's funny, you'd get all these things. For example, gas mask. That'd be an example of what you got. So what I know, you take a gas mask, and I'd put it on my rucksack. About 2 steps into the bush, the guys who had been there for a while grabbed it, tossed it. They said, you need to get as light as you can, and you're not going to need it. So things that you didn't need, you tossed. At great cost to the Department of Defense and ultimately we taxpayers, I guess.
Well, I got a burning question is, how does a kid from Waterloo learn how to shoot an M16 and operate hand grenades properly and all that?
You learn, you go to basic training, then you go to advanced infantry training. I was at Fort Knox for basic and Fort Polk, Louisiana for AIT, and you learn. It's 24/7 when you're in service. You eat and sleep and learn is what you do.
So I remember doing your, officiating your mom's funeral and learning about the care packages she sent you that made you the most popular guy there. What did she send in those?
Those were regular, and I got those even when I was in basic or AIT. As you know, we had the grocery business, and so Mom would just probably walk up and down the aisles and pick things that I liked and things I could actually eat out in the bush. And a box would arrive, and eventually it'd get to me out in the mountains. And so what I'd do, I'd get it, I'd take what I really wanted, what I could really hump, and everyone else got it, and I was the most popular guy in the world at that time, Mitch. It was neat.
That's terrific. Well, one mission, you're on helicopters and you take enemy fire. Can you describe that day to me?
That was tough. What happens is you fly out in helicopters. You get flown out to a designated spot, and surprisingly, Charlie always seemed to know where you were going to go. And so if you came and they knew you were there, oftentimes you'd fly into what was called a hot LZ. Could either be ground fire, it could be mortars, but as soon as you you didn't even hardly have to touch the ground in the chopper, you'd run into the woods or whatever else you could find. And if they're shooting at you, it's pretty tough because there's 8 of you jumping off a chopper, and the chopper wants to go, and everyone's got to get off safely. And so it's a frightening experience. It really is. It's just one you don't really want to remember too much.
Did you land and then take cover?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you load, and as soon as that chopper hit skids, hit the ground, boom, you're out, and you ran to the nearest cover, usually some woods.
And then how long did that last? That skirmish?
Oh, well, what happens is you run, and if it's 7 to 10 seconds to get to the woods, then you set up a perimeter, and depending on what would usually happen is they'd mess with the first few choppers, and then if it were ground fire, they'd leave. If it were mortars, they'd pop for a few minutes and then leave. You never found them. It was those are not good times.
I assume you're always on edge the whole time there, really, because of the potential for enemy fire.
Always on edge, and even if you didn't make contact, you were always on edge. Just if you're smart, you concentrated, and if you're an idiot, you'd screw around. So, it was intense.
One time you were sent out to fight, and they could have sent out the South Vietnamese troops, and that made you really start thinking about the whole situation. Can you talk about that?
That situation was this: we had humped into an ARVN, that's Army Republic of Vietnam base camp, where it was South Vietnamese troops, and we were going to stand down for I don't know how long, a few days at least, just to recover, so to speak, from being out in the bush for 3 or 4 weeks. And some other troops were in contact with the VC and North Vietnamese and needed help. And so obviously whoever their commander radioed to somebody and said, hey, we need some help. Well, they asked at where we were staying, at where we were standing down, and I couldn't believe it, but they sent us back out. They sent us as Americans who had just come out of the bush back out. And of course we did it because those people needed help. But my thought at that time, Mitch, was, wait a minute, this isn't right. Those are South Vietnamese soldiers. We're fighting to help them. This is their country. Shouldn't they be the ones to go out and help? And I thought to myself, that's not right. And so I made a statement earlier in an interview that I felt jaded after that. By that I really meant was I didn't think our cause was what it might have been when we first entered South Vietnam.
Maybe the purpose had been lost.
Purpose had been lost.
What was the perspective of the Vietnamese people of having us there?
For the most part, they didn't care. They didn't care. They didn't care who governed them or anything. They just wanted to, they all had rice paddies, and they wanted to raise their rice and raise their buffalo and feed their family and go on. So it wasn't like we got welcomed, oh, you are our savior. Never felt that at all. It was more like, what are you doing here? We don't need you.
And are you able to see newscasts or get newspapers from the United States while you're there?
Only if it gets sent to you. What we relied on were the Stars and Stripes, which is a military publication, which was obviously, it wouldn't tell you details. It would be something, it would be an overview more than anything.
So what's it like? You're going to have a 2-year commitment. Do you have a little calendar and you're counting down the days, or do you lose track of time?
I was drafted, so that's a 2-year commitment. A commitment when you go to Nam is for 1 year. And it's 365 days, obviously. So what happens is you get a calendar, and when you mark down to 100, that next day is 99, you become what's called a 2-digit midget. And then when you get down to 9, you're a single-digit midget. And those are great days. I remember this. We left from Cameron Bay to go home. It was neat. You didn't know anybody, but it's a bunch of soldiers who were ready to go home. We're flying down the runway at Cameron Bay, and it seemed like we were about an inch off the ground, and the plane just erupted.
Oh.
People jumping up and screaming. It was neat to see. It was neat.
Where do you fly into from there?
We flew into Seattle.
Okay.
Fort Lewis, Washington.
And you come home and you probably start seeing the protests and crazy name calling to soldiers and stuff. How did you handle that?
I did not see that personally, Mitch. I've said earlier that I never had a difficulty with people who protested the war. That's their personal choice. Famous phrase, I may disagree with what you say, I'll defend to the death the right to say it. I felt that way. So it's their right to say whatever they want. Those who talked about all the soldiers being baby killers, I simply said in my mind, that's just out of ignorance. It didn't happen that way. No one was really a baby killer intentionally. So I said, you protested, that's okay. I'm not going to object. I'm not going to get mad at you or do anything else. I just said, that's your right to protest, and I accepted it.
So you come back home. Do you go to law school then?
I did.
And how long does that take you?
A good thing was this. I only actually had to serve 19 months because if you had less than 150 days to serve after you left Nam, they'd give you an early out. And so actually I only had to serve 19 months. When I got back, my first year of law school, I had a hard time accepting the importance of law school. Any soldier will tell you that just to be alive is a good thing, just to be whole is a good thing. I took life as if, hey, I'm just happy to be here and don't bother me with things I'm not interested in. So first year law school, I wasn't as good a student. Last 2 or 3 years I'd adjusted and I did well, but it took some adjustment. It really did. It took some time to get back into the swing of things.
And then when you graduated law school, what did you do? Did you try to open your own practice? Did you go work for another firm?
I took a job with a firm in Fort Wayne right out of law school, still with the same basic people after 40-some years.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So you eventually became a partner in that same firm?
Uh-huh. The firm had a split in 1979, but the group I split with stayed together ever since. So that's a good thing. Lawyers are rather mobile, but we stayed together pretty good.
How did your time in Vietnam affect your perspective of law, of practicing law, and just life's challenges in general?
What the service did for me, Mitch, and being in Nam did for me primarily was to really appreciate life. Life's pretty short. This mortal life is pretty short, and I think you learn to appreciate it, and you have the mindset, you know what, I'm here such a short time, I'm going to try to do as much and as good as I possibly can. And I've tried to do that, not only in the practice of law, but just living. You just try to do what's right. You know, my constant prayer to the Lord is, help me to do what's right today. So that appreciation of life is what the service in Nam did to me as much as anything.
You talk about that law firm. I think you helped a young guy get started, and his name was Eugene Parker.
Yeah.
I'd like you to talk about Eugene.
I got acquainted with him from basketball, and I think what sealed our friendship was something that you would do as well. I saw him come out of a bank, and I'm walking down probably back to lunch or from lunch or something. I said, Eugene, and we talked, and he said, I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm trying to get a loan because I need some money to go to college. So he's going to be a freshman at Purdue. He says, I'm having some difficulties. I said, really? I said, let me see if I can help. I take him back into the bank. Well, I knew the people in the bank. I said, can you help him out? And, okay, what are you going to do? I said, I tell you what, I'll guarantee the loan. I knew Eugene would pay it back. There's no risk. So I guaranteed a small loan. I acted like I was a hero, but I wasn't. It was fun to do. He needed some help. It was no risk, so I did that. And he always appreciated that.
Oh my goodness.
That was the start of the relationship. We played ball a lot.
While he was playing at Purdue or after?
this would have been, we played ball afterwards. When he got out of school, he came back to Fort Wayne, worked for another law firm, but he played with us on teams, the industrial leagues and things of that nature.
Good move,
and he was good. He was real good. And so that's how I really got to know him. And what happened is this: he had been practicing law for, I would say, 4 or 5, maybe 6 years, and he came to me and my partner Phil Burt, and he said, "I need some help." He said, "I want to be a sports agent. I can't get it done where I'm at. Are you willing to help me out, so to speak?" Well, Phil Burt's a wonderful person, and I said, sure, there's no risk there. And so we helped him get started. We gave him an office, and he brought all sorts of people in and interview him, and it was fun to be around him because there's so much going on. But I knew he'd be a success. He's a great guy, wonderful Christian, honest as the day is long, and he just made connections in the mostly football world and represented some really, really big-time sports figures.
I think, was it Deion Sanders that said he got all the presentations from all the potential agents, and Eugene came in and told him like 2 sentences?
That was actually Martin, what was his first name? Played for the Jets. But anyways, what he said to Eugene, well, tell me why I should sign with you. And Eugene said 2 things. He said, "I'll never lie to you, but I'll never lie for you." That guy says, "I was sold."
Wow.
He said, "I was sold," right there.
Wow.
And that's where Eugene was. He was a sports agent, but he was a counselor. He would have, Deion Sanders got all his money, saved or most of it, because Eugene would take these young athletes who got all this money and said, "Here's what you're going to do. Here's a budget. That's yours. The rest of it I'm investing for you." And most of them listened to him, and the ones that did never had to worry about life after football.
That's incredible.
He did it the right way, Mitch.
What an amazing guy.
Yeah.
I've been told you've cooked one meal in your life, and that was to get your wife. Is that true?
You're talking to Joni. You
That's
know
right.
it too well. You used to come to our house and eat
Bananas Foster. I sure did.
That was a great way you started my brother's funeral. There's some things that Jim isn't, and that was, you said he wasn't a cook.
Yep.
That was great.
She said neither is his brother. He cooked one meal to get me.
True.
At what point did you two decide to adopt, and why? What was going on in your life?
We were normal in the sense that couples who normally adopt are ones who try to have children to conceive and can't. And so we looked at the alternatives. We both wanted to be parents. And the alternatives, after a lot of time and effort and money to try to get pregnant, were to adopt. And we adopted 2 boys. And it's not been perfect, but it's been a great thing to be a parent. I always wanted to be a parent, so did Joni. And that gave us the opportunity to be a parent.
And you've helped many other people adopt too.
It's interesting too, for me it was anyways, we adopted privately, and that's 35 or 6 years ago, and it wasn't, a lot of people didn't know what private adoption was. And I would get calls, "How'd you do it?" Well, I had to make myself expert. And I did, I think. I worked at it and studied and went to seminars and talked and met all the people that need to meet, doctors and hospitals and all the things you do to coordinate a good adoption practice. And so I was able to help a lot of people get children, place children that may not have otherwise been able to have children. So that's the most rewarding part of my practice ever, is the adoption practice.
Wow. Well, there's all kinds of attorney jokes and lawyer jokes. And you have seemed to practice law a different way. I know you've shared that your daily prayer is, "God, what do you want me to do today?" What's different about the way you practice law? I guess, for starters, it seems less litigious, so to speak. So how would you describe it?
I would say that I try to resolve matters rather than create them. Some lawyers look at people primarily as a fee. I don't let myself do that. I look at them and say, "What can I help you with? I got to make a living, so I got to charge you, but it's not like I'm looking at a fee when I look at you." If I make a mistake, I own up to it. It's not fun, but all lawyers make mistakes. I just think treating people the way God intended us to treat people is a good way to practice anything, Mitch. And so I try to, I guess, do it that way.
Looking in the rearview mirror of your life, Is there anything you would do differently?
I try to be a better husband and a better parent. I was a gunner in a sense. I worked hard and tried to become as good a lawyer as I could, and I think I would spend more time with family than I did. I think I tried to lead by example. I could have been more verbose in my love of the Lord and conveyed it more to my children than I have, because I think that's the only way to live, is allow God to work through you. So if I had a regret, I probably didn't spend enough time with family.
Well, Den, you've been a great inspiration to me, to
I don't know
your
how.
nephew Bob. We just think the world of you, and
Well,
I want to thank you for being vulnerable with us and sharing your story with us on the Restoration Road.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. I look forward to it when you ask me, and I appreciate it.
Thanks.
It's good to be with you.
Thanks. As you hear Den's story, I'd invite you, through whatever kind of crossroads you are in your life, you're presented with a choice. And usually that choice will be wise or foolish. And Proverbs tells us that if we humble our hearts to God and seek Him, that's the first step toward wisdom. The ability to make sense of our relationship with God to our circumstances. It actually means to apply, to make it sticky to our calendar, to our circumstances. And so I would encourage you to seek God's wisdom for the choice that you have. To maybe read a chapter a day in Proverbs that corresponds with the date of the month. Maybe you're at a point, at a crossroads of a career change. Pursue experts in the field. Go find someone who can help you find the way you're wired and make a wise choice on what's next. Maybe you're at a crossroads where you want to adopt a child. Call Den's firm, find other experts, get the information, and take those first steps. The point is that wherever you are, God will meet you there and help you with making a wise choice so that you can live in the life that He has designed for you.
I'm so grateful for Mitch. His wisdom has helped me in countless ways, and the insight and the application that he brings in this is going to serve your journey and your process in a fantastic fashion. So go get it. Thanks again for your support.